I felt my stomach twist as my aunt stepped onto my land like she already owned it, pointing at the boundary wall I had just built with my hard-earned savings. Her voice was loud enough for the neighbors to hear as she declared that this land was rightfully promised to our family's eldest son, my cousin, by my grandfather decades ago. Everyone around her nodded like a verdict had already been passed. It didn't matter that I was the only one who paid for it, registered it, and planned my future here. In their eyes, I was a thief. The first time I laid eyes on this land, I knew it was where my life would truly begin. After years of sacrificing every comfort, working overtime shifts, skipping vacations, living in a cramped apartment, I finally had enough saved to purchase something that would secure my future. It wasn't just land. It was my proof that I had made it on my own. No handouts. No family favors. Just me, my determination, and the promise of the life I chose to build. The soil still smelled fresh from recent rains when I stood there the day I signed the papers. The wind was soft, carrying with it the sound of distant birds and the hope of a quiet future. I remember looking at the horizon and whispering to myself, this will be my legacy. I didn't tell anyone in my extended family about the purchase until after it was finalized. It wasn't because I didn't trust them, it was because I knew how quickly good news turns into entitlement in my family. If they heard I was about to buy land, they would interfere. But once the papers were signed, I thought I was safe. I was so naive. The moment I shared the news in the family group chat, the reactions were not congratulations. They were questions. Where exactly is the land? Did you use family funds? Didn't Grandpa say that plot was meant to stay in the family? Those messages were the first signs of the storm that was about to hit me. It started with an invitation to what they called a small family discussion. I thought it was going to be a normal dinner. Maybe they were curious about my plans or wanted to celebrate with me. I even baked a cake. When I arrived at my uncle's house, the living room was full. Every chair was occupied. The air was tense. My older male cousin, the supposed heir of the family, sat in the center like a king waiting for his servant. My aunt stood up and said, before you start construction, we need to clear something up. That land you bought, it's not really yours. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. They claimed that decades ago, my grandfather made a verbal promise that the land, which he never actually owned at the time, would belong to the family's eldest son. They said it didn't matter who paid for it now because it was family destiny. My cousin smirked, leaning back like he had already won. We aren't saying you did anything wrong, he said. You just jumped ahead on something that wasn't meant for you. I replied calmly, I paid for it. It's in my name. But my aunt waved her hand dismissively. Legal paperwork doesn't override family decisions. We're here to restore what's right. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was an ambush. 2 days later, I drove to the land to meet the contractor I had hired to start leveling the ground. But as I pulled up, I saw 3 motorbikes and a car parked near the entrance. My uncle, 2 cousins, and even my elderly grandmother were there, standing in a half-circle like they were conducting a religious ceremony. They had brought incense sticks, turmeric powder, and flowers. My grandmother was chanting prayers as the others placed the offerings on the boundary line. My contractor looked at me, confused. Ma'am, are they conducting a land blessing ritual? No. They were staking a claim. When I confronted them, my uncle said, we're doing the family ritual to accept this land back into our lineage. Once this is done, you can begin construction, with permission from the family council. I clenched my jaw. There is no family council. This is my property. My cousin stepped forward, face inches from mine. You're a woman. You don't carry on the family line. This land was meant for the future of our blood. Not your vanity project. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because in that moment, I made a decision, I would not argue. I would not plead. I would document. They thought I was powerless. They had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. Instead of confronting them head-on, I spent the next week quietly preparing. I dug out every document, every receipt, every email, and text message related to the land purchase. I created a digital folder titled Receipts for Revenge, a name I chuckled at every time I opened it. I even contacted the local municipal office to confirm that I was the sole registered owner. Copies of the title deed, the payment ledger, and the notarized documents were all ready. Every single proof that the land was legally mine was neatly compiled. Meanwhile, my relatives continued their passive-aggressive family oversight. My aunt called daily, pretending to be concerned, asking if I had consulted with the family elders. My cousin would show up at the edge of the property to inspect progress, smirking whenever I looked away. Every visit, every call, every comment became part of the mounting evidence that they were trying to intimidate me. I stayed calm. I smiled. I built trust with my contractor and workers while maintaining meticulous records. Their arrogance was their weakness, and I was waiting for the right moment to exploit it. It came sooner than I expected. My uncle called a formal meeting at his house. He was confident, I could see it in his smirk. "We want to make this simple," he said. "You can keep the land, but the family should have a share of what you build. Think of it as honoring Grandpa's wishes." He handed me a list of demands, half of the property, labor contributions from my cousins, and a monthly family maintenance fee. The audacity. I listened carefully and nodded, pretending to consider it. "Of course," I said. "Let me get the paperwork ready." They smiled, thinking they had one. They didn't notice the tiny sparkle in my eyes. I had them exactly where I wanted. Over the next few days, I suggested plans that required their direct involvement, drafting designs, approving contractors, sourcing materials. They were excited to contribute. I made every step dependent on them signing documents, wiring money for labor, and purchasing supplies for the family project. By the time construction was supposed to begin, they had spent thousands and committed labor on land that was legally mine. Every dollar and every hour they invested was part of their own trap, and they didn't even realize it. Frustration started to show. My cousin complained that the concrete foundation was taking too long. My aunt fretted over aesthetic decisions. My uncle kept trying to assert control over the project timeline. I smiled sweetly at every complaint, agreeing, "Of course, your input is valuable." Meanwhile, I kept meticulous records of their contributions, photographs, receipts, signed documents, even videos of them working on the site. When they tried to corner me, I calmly said, "If you want to claim any authority, we need it in writing." They blindly signed every form I handed over, thinking it was the key to gaining control. Meanwhile, I was secretly consulting with a lawyer. Every document, every labor investment, every payment they made was now a legally binding record proving they had no ownership. They had been digging their own grave. I could see their arrogance starting to crack, but they still had no clue. Their hubris was astounding. The day came when I gathered the entire family at the site for the grand family blessing of the land. They were proud, smug, confident that they had maneuvered me into sharing the property. I handed my lawyer a stack of signed documents and said, "Thank you all for your contributions. Because of your help, the property is now even more secure and legally indisputable." Confusion spread across their faces. I explained step by step every signature they had provided, every hour they had worked, and every dollar they had spent had no legal bearing on ownership. In fact, their labor and money were now fully documented as voluntary contributions to my project. They tried to interrupt, to argue, to claim Grandpa's promise, but the lawyer calmly presented the title deeds, notarized records, and municipal confirmations. Every claim they had was invalid. Every attempt to assert control was nullified. The realization hit them like a lightning bolt. They had invested their time and money into my land, and they owned nothing. My aunt's face turned red with fury, my cousin's jaw dropped, and my uncle stammered. I remained calm, serene, smiling with satisfaction. I had endured weeks of intimidation, manipulation, and entitlement, but the tables had turned. I said firmly, "I wanted to honor Grandpa's memory, but property isn't about promises. It's about effort, investment, and legality. You all treated my work as a free resource. Now, the truth is visible to everyone." They were speechless. Other family members watching realized how entitled and manipulative the group had been. Socially, they were shamed. Emotionally, they were defeated. And legally, they had no recourse. It wasn't just about money or land, it was about proving a lesson: entitlement has consequences. Greed blinds people to reality, and those who attempt to steal what's earned through hard work will pay, in more ways than one. I watched as my relatives slunk away, defeated and humiliated. I allowed the contractor to continue with the foundation, the walls rising under my guidance. Each brick symbolized not just a home, but victory, independence, and justice. I made sure to maintain strong boundaries. Invitations stopped, calls went unanswered, and I focused entirely on my project. The land was mine, legally, financially, and emotionally. I also learned the most important lesson: preparation is power. Every document I saved, every video I recorded, every receipt I stored became a weapon of truth. I had transformed manipulation and entitlement into a lesson for my family and a story that others could witness and learn from. Standing on the edge of my property one evening, I felt proud, not just of the home I was building, but of the strength I had discovered within myself. I had faced my family's greed, endured their emotional assaults, and emerged victorious. And this victory was sweeter than I could have imagined. Looking back, I realized the land was never just soil and boundaries, it was proof of my perseverance, patience, and intelligence. My relatives thought they could take what I earned, but instead, they invested in my success without realizing it. Now, the house is rising brick by brick, every corner a testament to standing firm against entitlement. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about protecting what you've worked for and turning betrayal into triumph. Some lessons hurt, but they shape the strongest, smartest versions of ourselves.